and welcome again to another episode of Currently Speaking, the podcast of the Current Consulting Group. I'm Bill Current, founder of the Current Consulting Group, and you can find a new episode of Currently Speaking on all the major podcast platforms every week. Every Thursday, we post a new episode. You can also go to currentconsultinggroup.com, and in our archives, you'll find past episodes of Currently Speaking. We've been doing this for a little over a year now, and so there are dozens and dozens of episodes on there. So go to currentconsultinggroup.com, go to YouTube and look at our YouTube channel, and you'll find past episodes of Currently Speaking. And like it, subscribe, share it with others, help us grow our viewership. We want to get the word out to as many people in the drug testing industry as possible that Currently Speaking is available. So let me take a step back and just kind of paint the picture for our audience. So as I mentioned, Current Consulting Group specializes in policy development, compliance-related services. We have a team of people who work on policies. Sharon Botcher, as many of our in our audience will know, is the Director of Policy Services. And then we bring Christine Clearwater into this mix with her many years of experience and expertise. And she is sharing that with our team as well. And I think that's broadening our perspectives and how we provide these services to our clients. And let me mention also at the same time, because I know over the years, Christine has done many DOT policies like Federal Motor Carrier, et cetera. She has clients that have needed a DOT policy. Many in the audience know, of course, that Patrice Kelly from Odapsy joined Current Consulting Group on April 1st and became part of the Current Consulting Group. So by the time this episode is posted, the whole world will know that Sam Noe from Federal Railroad Administration and Juan Moya from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, but also from Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Administration, both have joined the Current Consulting Group in something we call the DOT Legends. And we also will be shortly announcing the addition of somebody from the FAA as well, joining Current Consulting Group. So we've got all of this expertise on the policy aspects of having a drug-free workplace program. And Christina, and I know that you have specialized in sort of the overall approach, making sure that your clients understand that, there's not just one thing. For example, as you mentioned earlier, drug testing is part of a comprehensive approach to a drug-free workplace program, an important part, of course. And I do want to ask you about what you think the future of drug testing looks like. But before I get to that question, how do you see those two worlds, non-DOT and DOT, sort of coexisting in respect to the policy angle?
One has to have two different policies, or for example, if you have Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration you have to comply with, or any other agency, you have to have a policy for that agency. And then your non-regulated policy. But there's a very interesting dynamic between them, because if it's done right, okay, those two policies can dovetail and work well together. So that in the case of DOT, if a situation happens that falls within the DOT parameters, then you always follow the DOT. But DOT isn't always as comprehensive as the non-regulated policy might be. So the DOT situation that occurs that isn't addressed in DOT can be addressed in the non-regulated on a broader scale, which it would be. And therefore, one could test an individual, just as an example, who's a DOT driver, but that situation didn't come up under the policy. They could test them under their non-regulated policy, so they can work well. An example of that, for example, is reasonable suspicion has to occur immediately before, during, or immediately following their DOT function. In the case of reasonable suspicion in a non-regulated policy, there are 13 things that constitute reasonable suspicion. So what you can do is then, if it doesn't fall within those immediate parameters under DOT, you could test them under a non-regulated panel. Same thing with post-accident. Post-accident is very limited. And in the case of post-accident, it's broader, and a well-developed non-regulated policy is broader. So you may be able to test them under the non-regulated if it doesn't fit DOT's definition. So they work well. So federally regulated employees really operate under two policies, with the primary being the agency from which they fall under.
That's interesting that you say that. I was on a call with Patrice a week or so ago, and she was explaining to a client that the DOT regulations sort of represent the minimum that you have to do.
Yeah.
If you're covered under the DOT regulations, you must do the following. You must test for these drugs at these cutoff levels, under these circumstances, and etc. But she said, but if a company wants to go beyond that, like Christine just explained, they would do so under their own authority. And that's where the state laws come into effect, right? Because then if they want to do something that's beyond the federal mandate, then the state laws would govern whether or not they could do that. If they wanted to, like you said, some states frown on random drug testing, for example. But under the DOT regulations, under Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration regulations, for example, you must do random drug testing and you must do it at this frequency rate, et cetera. So you can have both a non-mandated and a mandated program in the same company, but like you said, they're going to be two separate programs. You're going to have two different policies governing those two different aspects of your company.
Right, and also recognizing, Bill, the fact that they're not isolated. Because they're a driver, they only fall under one, or because they're non-regulated. So that it's really important that it's to the advantage of the employer to realize that because it's narrow, because it's determined sort of the baseline requirements that, for example, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration requires, that there's a lot more opportunity to identify potential problems within the workforce by being able to pop over to the non-regulated and have it be broader.
The future of the drug testing industry.
Yeah.
Where do you see this issue going in the future, given the legalization of marijuana and some of the economic challenges employers are faced with, et cetera, and yet they're still concerned about maintaining a safe workplace?
We have to maintain safe workplaces. There's a legal document, Respondeat Superior, which basically it covers negligent hiring and retention. And it basically is saying that employers have a liability for what their employees do. So in the case, employers know or should have known that drugs have a negative impact on an organization. So we have a huge umbrella on top of us in the employment world that safety is a high priority, and based with the fact of doing as best we can to provide a safe and work environment. So from there, if we sort of move over to the testing side of things, if we go back to your first question, there's the biggest change that's come about, I think, since the beginning of the 89 of implementing and having policies. And that was that urinalysis has been the traditional form of testing, and since the beginning. So it has a very long window of detection, which has always created a lot of discomfort. And how do I handle this window of detection, which could be up to 2 weeks, where it can identify a metabolite of a drug, when in fact I'm really only concerned about the last day or two. So the trend right now that's moving for drug testing is one in which it's moving off urinalysis at a fairly rapid speed. For example, California now requires oral fluid testing. So oral fluid testing is coming up to the plate due to the window of detection. And that 24 to 36 hour is very appealing for employers. They don't need to know beyond that time. What they want to know is someone coming into work who could be at risk to themselves and others. So oral fluid testing is a very significant contribution to the industry. And even DOT has passed that and allowed for oral fluid testing. And we're simply waiting for those agencies to be able to use it because they're getting the testing laboratory process fine-tuned. So then employers can be less concerned about being challenged or how do I defend, were they under the influence where it was affecting, they were impaired, or did they just have it in their system from a week or two ago where it was non-psychoactive versus psychoactive. So I think that's the biggest change in testing. testing years ago, another change I'm seeing with my clients is years ago they did a lot more testing than they do today. And I think that stems back to the harder to find employees, harder for retention, and so on. So they don't test as much as they did. Random testing is backing down a little bit, but random testing is an incredibly powerful tool. It doesn't generate a lot of positives, but it's a powerful, influential tool within the culture of that organization. So I would say one of the biggest trends is shifting gears from urinalysis to oral fluids, and employers are going to start getting more demanding. This is what I want. This is how I want to do it. And it can be done similarly to urinalysis. It can be done on site, collected through saliva, oral fluid testing, and it's non-invasive. So it can be collected on site easily and sent to the lab directly, or it can be collected on site and have it interpreted for a negative or non-negative. Negative is fine, process stops. Non-negative would in every state, need to be confirmed on a laboratory-based test. But that's, I think, an incredibly powerful tool for employers to gain comfort and to know that there's such a short window of detection that someone turns positive there's truly a concern for their safety and the safety of others.
So you see drug testing continuing to be a very important part of how employers maintain a safe and drug-free workplace, but maybe how they go about drug testing probably going to change dramatically in the future.
Dramatically from that direction, yes. And I think that the forms of testing and how they structure it, I mean, there are different ways of doing testing. There are over 20 different ways you can test someone. Maybe they did everybody, but now they do safety sensitive only. But I think employers are still hanging on to believing strongly in the baseline, which is pre-employment, reasonable suspicion, post-accident, definitely random in there, certainly if they have client required, classic for construction or service industries. So the testing is up there. It's just not quite as big as it was, but I also see that it's more effective than ever. And I think it is one component of the 6 components of a good program, and an important one that has gone through a lot of changes. And the changes have really been in the last 10 years. If we look at the industry from, say, 89, 90, which is 35 years, I think, that's just my personal opinion, the biggest changes have been happening where employers are shifting gears and understanding the value of oral fluid testing.
So drug testing stays, how we do drug testing changes, still as valuable as ever, right, from your perspective, an important part of a comprehensive program, a very important piece of the overall approach to drug testing. And, sort of based on what you said earlier, the legalization of marijuana is sort of pushing employers in a certain direction, not to necessarily give up drug testing, but maybe changing their programs in different ways. And I would assume, Christine, right, anytime a company makes a significant change in how they go about their drug-free workplace program, they're going to need their policy to be updated and aligned with state laws.
Yes. That's beyond a given. that's such a given. I think the 6 components in looking at a program, let's not just look, is the policy. Non-regulated, regulated is certainly the policy. From there is knowing the state law. If you're in one state, but if you're in multi-state, what's key is the way states look at it is if I have a construction company, but my people operate in a number of other states, they're a paving company, they do whatever, or I have a service business that services a lot of companies across the United States, or there can be a lot of different kind of industries that are multi-state. Those states expect you to operate under their statutory laws. So that changes. So you need to know when you have your policy, the statutory laws at that time, but it needs to constantly be updated because they're changing. So the policy and then knowing the state laws is key. Drug and alcohol testing, that's a process of evaluating what's best for a particular organization and how they operate and what would best serve their particular risks. Construction companies are different than manufacturing companies that are different than restaurants that are different than, and so it goes. And then certainly employee education and manager training. I can't say enough about that, because the effectiveness of employee education manager training on a new program or an updated program is very high. Employees that are educated understand what they're responsible for, what their behavior or what their activities, um, where they're accountable. That's really where it is. And they suddenly get, okay, it's not the prisoners running the prisoners. No, these are the rules, and this is how it works, and this is reasonable, and it's fair, and there are consequences accordingly. And I think that with that, so employees are far more likely to follow the policy, understanding what the rules are. In the case of supervisors and managers, understanding the policy, but their role under the policy. What are your expectations of me? Top management is not running this day to day. Management is, supervisors and managers. So there are multiples. I've seen different studies. They're 5 times more likely, they're 7 times more likely to use and follow the proposal, the policy, excuse me. So education and training is critical. I mean, we have that, as you know, we have everything from online training, which can, in fact, be somewhat customized and provides an opportunity, particularly if someone has their own platform, or if they don't, they can come into ours with the idea that they can have education and training at their own pace and learn and come in over time, and companies can track it and know who's done what. So that's a very powerful tool. There's also PowerPoint presentations that can be created, custom PowerPoint presentations that can be created, and in person. There's always in person.
Yeah.
So I think education and training, I would consider that sort of the third component of a good program. And then, of course, access to support, whether that's local support, whether that's an employee assistance program, whether you just post some resources on a board. There are a lot of things you can do about accessing support. And then the ongoing consulting support. You don't want to be someone comes in, does a program, and they disappear. You want to know that you've got someone who's got your back and is going to continue to get your back on this one. So it's an evolving industry that has basically 6 components. Last one being updating, of course. And I think that it's a program that would be, humbly saying, trying to be humble, I should say, it's very complicated and difficult for companies to do their own, because it's gotten complicated and intricate. And the state laws have contributed to that. And the testing changes in testing have contributed to that. So as I said earlier in our call, it's a narrow niche of risk management, loss control, but it's deep. It's very deep. And that's where it comes in, where you really can use a professional who can support your initiatives now and on an ongoing basis.
Well, Christine, thank you so much for being part of Currently Speaking. This is the end of part 2 of our presentation, but this concludes my interview with my very special friend of many, many years, Christine Clearwater, who is the senior consultant for risk management services here at Current Consulting Group. Christine, thank you so much. It's just wonderful that our 2 companies are one, and that we're working together, and that we get the opportunity to work together every week. It's a dream come true for me.
For me as well. Absolutely, Bill, for me as well. Thank you. And thank you for today.
You're welcome. Now, if you'd like to catch more episodes of Currently Speaking, just go to our website at currentconsultinggroup.com. Look under the archive of our past podcasts, and you'll find dozens and dozens of episodes there. You can also find us on all the major podcast platforms, as well as YouTube. And if you have some issues that you would like us to address in future episodes of Currently Speaking, just go to info@currentconsultinggroup.com, and we would love any suggestions or ideas that you have for topics to cover in the future. And that concludes this 2-part interview with Christine Clearwater. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.